So my name is Larissa Muirhead, and I grew up in Laurentian here, and started kind of diving into plants and their medicinal and cosmetic uses about 10 years ago. And recently, in the last 4 years, kind of paired up with an elder in Laurentian, Eleanor Hageland. So much of my knowledge I credit to her, and when I do go out and work with her, I follow the Cree protocol for being on the land. And that's important because as from settler descent, when I go out by myself, there are certain things I've taken from Eleanor that I find work for me when I work with plants in regards to respecting the land and respecting the plants that I harvest. But then there's other things that I don't continue with. But when I'm with Eleanor and accepting her teachings about the plants, I always make sure that I follow protocol. Some of those protocols is she makes me wear a skirt and rubber boots up to my thighs, and it's the most uncomfortable way to go into a marsh and pick plants, but it's considered how you handle medicine is always with the skirt on. And the other thing is that we always make an offering to the four directions with tobacco, and Eleanor says her prayers in Cree, and eventually will likely get passed my way when I learn enough Cree to be able to speak them. But for now, I just honor the four directions before we pick anything, and always drop tobacco in the site where we do harvest from. My descent is Icelandic and Danish, so I do have a couple books that I've acquired. This one is like Icelandic herbs and their medicinal uses, and because it's a boreal forest and it's white, it does take up a lot of the land on our earth. It's a lot of the same plants used in Iceland as it is here, so it's nice to have the kind of my origin and also blend with the teachings that Eleanor gives me. So I have here a couple of the plants that are really easy to start with. They're super abundant, and they're just great to have in your home when you want to make a cup of tea, or I'll go over a couple of the other things that I make with them. So we'll start first with ethical harvesting. So when we harvest plants, it's important to notice the environment that you're taking it from. You don't want to take plants from the side of a road. Lots of the times the highways are salted and the emissions from cars land on them. There's often just not very high quality herbs, so it's good to walk into the forest and find a nice little area that has the plant or the herb that you're looking for, and just to avoid those areas. And then when you look at the plant, you also want to notice how it's growing. If it's growing very abundantly in that area, then utilize that plant. It's probably going to be able to flourish even after you pick from there. It has vibrant colors. It doesn't look like it's suffering or that the plants around it are suffering. And just to make note of kind of the environment it's growing in. Is there garbage around there? Does it look like the water might be contaminated? All of those factors play into the quality of the plant that you're going to be using. So especially if you're ingesting, like making a tea, it's super important to make sure that you're paying attention to where you're harvesting from. If you're drying plants for first aid use, that's another thing. You can kind of just pick them, especially if it's an emergency. You can pick them and use them right away. You don't need to go off the beaten path really and use those. And I'll talk about a couple of those plants in just a little bit here. Taking more than what you need is never advised. There is an abundance of plants in our forest, but that doesn't mean that we need to go in there and take all of them. In order for environment to flourish, we need to be mindful of what we're taking and how much we're taking and why we're taking it. If we come up to a birch tree, and this is a prime example because chaga right now is so popular as this magic mushroom that can just cure everything, and it is an amazing medicine when used properly and extracted properly. But people are chopping down live trees and taking the chaga, and it's not sustainable. Chaga takes 3 to 5 years to even gain medicinal properties within the fungus itself, and then when you do harvest it, you can actually, just take a third of it and leave the rest behind, and it'll regenerate itself, and you can keep harvesting from that one little patch of chaga for many, many years, because it takes chaga quite a long time to kill a birch tree, which it will eventually do, but that's an example. We don't want to go, and if you don't need chaga, and you go and you chop down a tree and you take the chaga and it sits in your house for a couple of years, and then you remember, oh, I have chaga, maybe I should, do something with it. It's already lost a lot of its medicinal properties just by sitting there and not being extracted. So it's important that when you do take from the forest that it's what you need, and it's not too much, and it's not for the wrong reasons. When I harvest in the spring and the summer, I usually know how much I'm going to use for the year, because there are plants that only happen seasonally, and one of those is the wild rose that we have here. So this is just that's one of the roses, and when I harvest wild rose petals, I use them for cosmetic reasons, and I also use them in teas. But rose is very emollient, so it's very gentle to the skin. It's extremely hydrating, so it's good to use in creams. It's good to use, I make a rose hydrosol that I just spray my face with and keep it in my fridge, and it's really hydrating, and it's really nice, especially on sunburns in the summer. And then I just dry the leaves, and you can keep them in here, and I use them just throughout the year, whether it's tea or if I'm making a cream. The other thing that comes from roses, but not until later in the year, so the wild rose, I'll just touch on this a few more seconds, is there's 5 petals, and they're a huge source of pollen for the bees and the pollinators in the area. So when you do pick the wild rose leaves, just take 4. Leave 1 or a couple so that they can identify it as a flower, and they're still attracted to it. So that's one of the ways that you can be an ethical harvester, is just to recognize that there's other animals and insects that use these plants, and in order to identify them, they do need to see certain things. So just leaving a petal behind for them is just great practice. It ensures that the pollinators can still use them. Then in the fall, wild roses grow these beautiful hips, and if you're using them for cosmetic reasons, which they're packed full of vitamin C, so they can be used for any anti-aging creams, anything like that. But what I really like to use them for is for syrup. So I mix them with elderberries that I get from British Columbia, and I make a winter syrup, a cough syrup almost, and it's just packed full of vitamins, helps with the immune system. It's a really great little berry. The only thing is that the seeds inside have these hairs, and if you ingest them, they're extremely irritating to the digestive tract. So you'll probably only do it once, and it's a horrible experience from what I've heard. I've never experienced it. So just being careful that when you do use plants, knowing that there are some that have some side effects, and that's one of the things. So what your options are is you can dry them, and when you boil them in a tea, those hairs get, they just kind of deactivate. They don't do that anymore, but you can just string them up, dry them, and keep them for a year. They usually stay good for about a year. After that, they lose their quality. So you want to, when you're picking, you want to make sure that you know that you're going to use that amount in about a year. So the next one that's super common in Larange and in our boreal forest is the Labrador tea. So, or the muskeg tea or the bog tea. It has like a very lemony kind of scent and flavor to it. And in July, I'm pretty sure it's July, it has these incredibly fragrant and beautiful white blossoms on them. And so you can pick those blossoms, as long as you're in a patch that's quite abundant, pick the blossoms, and you can put those right into like an olive oil and make a very beautiful infused oil that has a lot of skin healing properties. And it's also nice if you mix it with like the wild chamomile or the rose, and you can make just a really nice hydrating skin oil or even a lotion from that afterwards. So that's the flowers. They can be used in tea too. They're just fine to drink. And then Labrador tea, the actual leaves, I use cosmetically. So I make a cleanser, and it's just with I use oatmeal and Labrador tea, yarrow, and the wild rose, sometimes the fireweed. If I know somebody has really like inflamed skin or lots of redness, fireweed's really great for taking out inflammation. But I take all of those things and I grind them up in a coffee grinder, and I make this really fine powder, and I'll add just a couple drops of water to it and make a paste, and that's what you can wash your face with. Labrador tea is amazing for things like acne, lots of skin conditions. You can just bathe with the leaves and they actually will help heal some of those skin conditions. So, but it's best to do like a little bit of research, and I'll show the book that I get most of my stuff from. And then also it's just, again, packed full of vitamin C and really easy to use when you're in the bush if you needed like an emergency tea or just a cup of tea to enjoy. The next plant is yarrow. This one I use for so many things. This is an incredible plant. It's considered a noxious weed by most farmers in the south, but its medicinal properties are amazing. It's mild enough that you can use with children, but in very small doses and not for a long period of time. But for colds and fevers, flus, it's antiviral, so it can do a lot when you do have a virus. It kind of boosts that immune system, and it also has what we call antistyptic, so it stops bleeding. So if you are walking along the path and you trip and you cut your leg open, you can take the leaves, which they probably can't see this very well, but they just look like this. They grow just on the stem, and sometimes you can find them growing without the flower, and those are the nice young spring ones that I like to collect. They're really good for the skin. And you can just grind it up, put it inside the cuts, and the antibacterial, antiviral, and the antistyptic properties will stop the bleeding and keep an infection from starting until you can, clean the wound at home. The other thing is it has also like an analgesic, so it helps with pain. You can take a root and chew the root. If you have like a toothache or anything like that, you can just chew the root and push it up against the tooth that's sore, and it'll actually take away that pain. You can use the leaves and the flowers too, and then it also, because of its antibacterial, it'll prevent any infection from growing further in that little spot. So very versatile plant. Again, I use it in that skin cleanser because it's really good for keeping the skin clean, for pulling toxins out of the skin, and it's just really, really versatile. And in a tea, it's pretty tart, so it's best to be blended with other things, but you can just pick it, dry it, hang it upside down, and have a nice little tea, or even a bath. If you have a child that has a fever, or if you have a fever, you can just throw it right in the bathtub. And a yarrow bath sometimes will just help to bring that fever down. Sometimes it'll break it for them. Fireweed is another thing that we have, and it's recently been popularized by a local business that has been selling it for cosmetic purposes, but our fireweed has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. So you can use it in skin creams, in little salves and things like that to help with inflammation. It's also really, really nice in a tea. I have it mixed with the boreal tea that I make, which is just right here, and I'll go over kind of the little things that I've put in here in a bit. But it's just a very gentle herb. I've seen people bake it into cakes. It's edible. The flowers are edible, so you can get really creative with fireweed. It's a beautiful plant. It's very mild. It can be used by all ages. Its leaves can be cooked like spinach in the spring. It's they're packed full of vitamins too. So it's one of those plants that from top to bottom, it can really help you out if you encounter it in the bush and you need to have just a little bit of first aid. It has vitamins and nutrients in it that will keep you going till you get hopefully to a safe space. The next one is the wild or the red raspberry leaf. So the berries, of course, are delicious, but the leaves are actually where we find a lot of astringent properties, toning properties. So this is really popular with the like the maternity and pre and postpartum women. It's a uterine tonic, so it works really well with the uterus, and you can also just use it as like it's more of a female plant. It has like, you know, it kind of leans towards the female. And so what you can do is you can take the leaves, they're a little bit prickly, like raspberry bushes are prickly, but you can just, if you have a really nice big patch that's growing, you can just chop down some of the branches and just hang those up, collect the leaves, dry them, and then just use them for tea. They're quite nice, they don't have too much of a flavor, but you can blend these with nettle and red clover, and you've got like a really vitamin dense drink. So what you can, how I use red raspberry leaf, red clover, and nettle, is I take about a tablespoon of each one of the dried, and I put it into a big quart, like bigger than this, pour hot water over it the night before, and then the next day I can drink that all throughout the day. It's quite sweet, like nettle, stinging nettle people are always quite afraid of, but it's one of those plants that is just, it's phenomenal. It has, what does it have? Well, it has lots of vitamins and minerals in the leaf, and when you pour water on it, it actually, or apply heat to it, it actually has no more sting value to it. So you can just use it like that. I dry it, and I still use gloves after it's dried because I have developed rashes after it's dried and I've handled it. So I just am careful with that, or I mush it up really good and make sure to break it down so that I don't react too much. But underneath stinging nettle, and I don't have a picture of it, and I don't have any left, I've used most of it up. Most of the time, growing right under stinging nettle is a plant called plantain. I'll actually pull it up in here. I have some dried here. It grows everywhere. They've called it white man's foot because it's grown everywhere that settlers have gone. But it's honestly in every driveway. It's just this one right here. It's got very viney leaves on it and a spike that comes right up, and it develops seeds on it. So we've had people use the seeds as like a psyllium or a bulking laxative. It's used that way. And the leaves, so if you get stung by stinging nettle, which is the same acid that is in a red ant, so it's the same sting, they have the same venom in them. You pick up a plantain leaf, you crush it up, and you can just rub it on that. It'll take it away almost instantly. It's a very cool plant. It's amazing for skin conditions. I use it in almost every salve that I make because it does just absolute wonders for any first aid salves that you make. This is red clover. So this is another weed that is everywhere. Again, it has a certain affinity for women. It really likes menopausal women. but it helps with things like hormone balancing, and it actually helps with scar tissue. So there's certain conditions that like PCOS and things like that that females can get with their reproductive system that red clover has been shown to do wonders for. It's also being studied heavily in the cancer industry. So it has a lot of medicine in it, but it's also just really good, again, in like that, in a woman's tea. So with the nettle and the red raspberry leaf, you can combine those two. The next one is called pineapple weed, and it is, I only have it ground up here because I use it in skincare products and infuse it in oil. But it grows, again, everywhere. It is in your driveway. It's probably in the school driveway, but don't pick it from there. You can get it from better sources. It grows in the bush too. But it is a very, very close cousin to actual chamomile. So it has the same properties. It's very soothing. It's gentle in the digestive system. So it can help with sleep. It can help with an upset stomach. If you are having like a cold or a flu, it helps sweeten up the teas that you might need to drink that might involve yarrow or other plants that are a little bit more bitter. You just add some of that chamomile, it sweetens it right up. It's one of those, again, very safe herbs. It doesn't have too many interactions. I don't think it has any, actually, when I'm really thinking about it. So it's another one of those herbs that you can just basically get to know really well and use in almost everything. And wild mint. So this one is probably everyone's favorite. It grows along the shorelines. It's aromatic, so you can smell it before you see it when you like roll through a patch of it. It's just beautiful. It grows with those big purple flowers on it, and when you harvest it, it's really important that you don't pull it out from the roots, because when you do that, you're actually harming, like it won't grow back. So it needs those root systems. You can just pluck off the top of it and it'll actually grow more. So it'll keep growing throughout the summer. You can keep using it. But wild mint is really, really good for cooling the system. So using it in a tea when you have a fever, using it in a tea when you have an upset stomach, using it if you're just hot. You know, you can have it as a cold tea, enjoy it like that, and it's really versatile. I use mint a lot when I do my, I make a spruce and a wild mint lip balm. So it's just really cooling and it's hydrating to the lips, so it's just a really nice little blend, and it just makes every tea taste good. So I'll go over a couple of the cosmetic things that I use them for. I have a salve. Just grab it 1 second. And salves are like one of the first things that I learned how to make. They're super simple. All you do is blend, you infuse the plant of choice with oil, an oil of your choice. So I usually pick olive oil because it has a long shelf life. And then you blend that with beeswax and it creates a salve. So that's something you can put on cuts and scrapes. This one is made, this is a blend of wildflowers, so this one is chamomile and the fireweed, wild rose, plantain, and there was one other thing, spruce. So it's got just a really nice chamomile scent, and it's just super simple to make, and you can keep it. It's really hydrating for the skin if you want to add it in the winter to your regular moisturizer. Things like that. It's just easy, and it's from my backyard. It genuinely cost me almost nothing to make this. And probably higher quality than the stuff that you would buy in the store. You know, that especially things with like polysporin that have an antibiotic in it, when our bodies are already so bombarded with antibiotics in our foods and everything. It's important that we look to alternatives when we get cuts and scrapes, things like that, that we aren't putting an antibiotic on it right away. You know, we can fend, our systems can handle a little tiny infection if we put the right plant on it, And again, the lip balm. So with the lip balm, again, it's the olive oil or the oil of your choice and the beeswax. I added a little bit of shea butter and I melted it all in a double boiler system and you can look that up. They're really easy to make. I just use a pot and a bowl. That's all it is, with water in the pot, and you put the bowl on top. And you melt it all together and then you pour it into these clean jars. And it keeps for a long, long time. And they're nice gifts to give to people. The other things that I make are infused oils. So taking plants like spruce that have a lot of skin, what's the word? So this is for, I make this, I call it beard oil, but it's really a skin oil because a lot of guys don't have, they have a soap and water regime for their face. And so this is just something that you can add to your face. It's made with rosehip seed oil. So I infused rose hips in the olive oil, giving it really packed hydration. And then I added spruce, juniper, and all of those are just from my backyard. Infused into an oil, put into a jar, and I let them infuse generally for 2 weeks to a month. Depends on the plant that I'm using. But that all comes with practice. If you start playing around with it, the possibilities are endless for what you can create. And this is my deodorant that I made. So it's with witch hazel, a little bit of baking soda, yarrow, wild mint, and rosemary. And rosemary has antimicrobial, and yarrow's in there, so it's antibacterial. And then the mint is just for the coolness of it. And I've had this now for over a year, and it's still good. It looks crazy because the plant is still in there, and so all of the color has been sucked out of those plants. But it's another thing, and it works, and it's natural. It has no chemicals in it, and it was made literally from, I think the witch hazel might be $10 or something at a natural food store. So it's pretty cheap to make. You can make a whole big batch of it, bottle it up, and you'd have lots for a long time. And the other things that I like to make are, I have little bath salts that I use. I actually got these salts from a company in Quebec, I believe, but they extract them from the prairies here, and they're just these really pretty pink salts full of minerals. And the other thing you can use is Epsom salts or oatmeal, anything like that. You can blend them with herbs and just put them into your bath. It's nice if you can put them into a cheesecloth or something and then drop them in so you don't have plug the drain with all of your plants. I've done that. Husband wasn't happy, but it's just kind of a trial and error sort of thing. But my favorite thing to do with plants is to make tea. I love blending them and making different things, and lately I've been working with a couple of my friends who have had pretty long congested coughs, things like that, and just seeing what plants are working to kind of break things up and make those coughs go away. But this is just a really nice blend of a bunch of boreal plants that are all very mild. So I have blueberry leaves, which are these red ones, and so I put blueberry leaves in there, wild mint, red raspberry leaf. I have the fireweed, I think I said mint. I have spruce and Labrador tea and clover, and I just blend it all up. And I have an infuser just like this, where you can put the herbs in, pour the hot water on them, and then it's a press, so a French press, I guess, and then you just push it down and you've got a really nice tea that you can drink throughout the day with just kind of an alternative to water. There's lots of vitamins and minerals in there that help nourish the body and the tissues, and you can just kind of keep that immunity up just by using it using herbs like that. I think that's pretty much it with the plants that I brought. You can always feel free to contact me for any questions that you have about plants. I can do my best to answer them if I know. I'm on Facebook as Northern Apothecary, and that is the best way, I guess, to get a hold of me for questions about plants. But I hope that you guys, I know it's winter, so there's not much that you can do. I guess you can harvest some spruce pitch. But yeah, so I hope that this helps you guys to kind of get out there and experience the plant life and see if there's some blends that you can come up with yourself.
Thank you.